Hello, and welcome to the Lifestyle School podcast. This is a podcast where we break down the science of sustainable weight loss and metabolic health solutions, giving you the tools to create lasting change. I'm your host, Hope Plack, and today we're going to be taking a deep dive into one of the most widely accepted, but what I believe to be deeply flawed weight loss strategies, and that is calorie counting. So, for decades, we have been told that weight loss is as simple as calories in versus calories out. Burn more than you eat, and the pounds will just magically melt away. Have you been told that? I know I have definitely been told that, and I'm told pretty much every day on Instagram that message as well. But if it were truly that simple, then why do so many people find themselves trapped in a cycle of dieting, hitting a plateau, or even regaining the weight that they fought so hard to lose? The reality is that while calories matter, they are only one piece of a much larger puzzle, a puzzle that includes hormones, metabolism, food quality, and even our psychology. So, today we're going to go beyond the calorie count and we're going to look at what really drives long term fat loss and metabolic health. And if you've ever found yourself meticulously tracking every bite, I have been there, only to feel frustrated when the scale won't budge, or worse, when the weight creeps back despite your best efforts, then this episode is truly for you. And before we dive in, I want to just make it perfectly clear that this podcast is for educational purposes only. I am not a doctor, and this is not medical advice. I always want you to talk to your healthcare provider before making any major changes to your diet, exercise routine, lifestyle, especially if you have underlying health conditions. So, with that, let's get started. So, before we discuss why calorie counting isn't the golden ticket to weight loss, let's take a step back and look at, where did this idea even come from? Right? Have you ever asked yourself that question? Where did calorie counting start? How did this become such a pervasive thing within our culture? The concept of measuring food in calories dates back to the late 1800s, where a scientist named Wilbur Atwater began experimenting with a bomb calorie meter. So these are devices that burn food to measure its energy output. This man calculated that carbohydrates and proteins contain about 4 calories per gram, while fats had about 9 calories per gram. And this became the foundation for modern calorie counting. But here's where things get really interesting. Atwater's research actually wasn't originally meant for weight loss. It was designed to help farmers feed their livestock more efficiently and to ensure that soldiers were getting enough nutrition during wartime. It wasn't until the early 1900s that calorie counting became a weight loss tool, thanks in a large part to a woman named Lulu Hunt Peters. She was a doctor who wrote the wildly popular book at the time, Diet and Health, with Key to the Calories in 1918. She was the first woman to say, a calorie is a calorie. And I'm sure you've heard that over and over and over again over the course of your lifetime. And this woman, Mrs. Peters, she promoted the idea that weight loss was just simple math. Burn more than you eat and you will lose weight. And I will say, this woman's philosophy, her book, has really shaped many, I think, women's lives over the course of the last 100 years since she introduced it. At first glance, it makes sense, right? It's easy, it's measurable, it gives people a clear formula to follow. But the truth of the matter is that the human body is far more complex than simple math, right? If a calorie counting truly worked the way that we were told, then why do millions of people struggle with weight gain, even when following the numbers? The problem isn't just the calories, it's how your body responds to the calories, right? And that's where things really start to break down. So let's break this down into three major flaws of calorie counting. There is more that we could get into, but I think this is a really great place to start. And I want you to see, why calorie counting for weight loss often fails in real world scenarios. So we're going to dive right into flaw number one is that your metabolism is adaptive. It's not static. Most calorie counting models assume that your metabolism works like a calculator, which is unchanging, it's predictable, and easy to control. But in reality, our metabolism is actually more like a thermostat. And we have talked about this in previous podcasts. I believe it was podcast episode 6, where we were talking about leptin. When you reduce calories, your body doesn't just burn stored fat and move on. Instead, it senses a drop in energy intake and responds by slowing down your metabolic rate to conserve energy, right? And this makes total sense if you just use logic, right? Our bodies are meant for survival. If they didn't do this, we would just waste away. And, people hundreds of years ago who didn't have a convenience store on the corner, who, didn't have all this food readily available, they wouldn't have survived in times of winter where food was more scarce. And a perfect example of this comes from the Minnesota starvation experiment in the 1940s. Research placed men on a restricted calorie diet for 6 months. And while they did lose weight, they also experienced severe metabolic slowdown. These men became obsessed with food. Their body temperatures dropped. And when they were allowed to eat freely again, they binge ate and quickly regained weight and then some. So fast forward to today, we see the same phenomenon in modern dieting. I don't know if any of you guys have ever seen the show The Biggest Loser, but have you ever wondered why so many of these contestants on this show, The Biggest Loser, gain back the weight after extreme caloric restriction? Well, the studies show that their metabolic rate remains permanently lowered and lower than expected, making weight maintenance nearly impossible without extreme effort. So it's like you reduce your calories, you lose weight, but your metabolism doesn't bounce back after it has slowed to slow down this weight loss, because your body's like, we got to slow things down or, we're going to die. So, I don't know if you have experienced this in your own weight loss journey. I know for many women and even men, we have lived on this constant calorie restriction roller coaster where we'll do a diet, whether it's counting points, counting calories, counting macros, we'll slash calories. We'll see a little bit of progress. Maybe we'll lose 10 pounds. Maybe we'll lose 20 pounds, maybe even a little bit more, depending on, how much weight you have to lose to begin with. And, the foods that you eat matter. But eventually your metabolic rate does slow down and you start to plateau and you're like, well, what am I doing? And, you feel really hungry during this process because one of those other pathways that your body utilizes, it increases your appetite when your body senses that you're not having enough energy coming in with calorie restriction. So, hopefully you see yourself in this flaw, because I think so many people experience this and it leaves us feeling really defeated because, you're like, well, what's wrong with me? I've been told over and over and over again. It's like someone has been hitting me over the head with a bat saying, just eat less and move more and it will work for you. And you're like, but it's not, right? And that's how I felt, honestly. But enough of that. Let's move on to flaw number 2. And that is that not all calories are created equal. So imagine 2 meals. You're at a fast food burger joint. My preferred one is In-N-Out here in California. I do think they use a little bit fresher ingredients than some. But you have a fast food burger with French fries, and let's say it's, 600 calories. Well, then on the other plate, you have a plate of salmon, roasted vegetables, and avocado. That is also 600 calories. According to the calories in, calories out model, these meals should have the same impact on your body. But if we just use common sense, and so much of nutrition, I will say, on some level is common sense, we know that that's not the truth, no matter what people on Instagram or YouTube are telling us, right? The first meal, the fast food burger, is highly processed. It's going to spike our insulin and it's going to lead to increased fat storage. While the second meal is nutrient dense, it's going to keep our blood sugar stable and it provides essential fatty acids that support our metabolism. There was a study published in Food and Nutrition Research, and it found that people who ate processed foods burned 50% fewer calories during digestion than those who ate whole foods, despite eating the same number of calories. And I mean, honestly, if you have like a baseline level of nutrition, maybe you've heard of the thermogenic properties of food, of where like your body burns calories when you're eating protein because it takes a lot more work for your body to burn those calories. That makes sense, right? Because typically processed and ultra processed foods are put together by scientists in a lab in a very certain way to be extremely palatable, to give you a really great dopamine response, to make you feel good in the moment. And a lot of times they're very processed carbohydrates, where like all of the nutrients, like if it's based in wheat or corn, any of the good components of wheat or corn have been stripped away to make it essentially pure glucose, because there's no fiber, there's none of those other minerals or phytonutrients found in there, and it's just straight glucose. And so your body can break those down very quickly. It does not have to work very hard. And that is going to, be a big part of this process. Of processed foods are going to result in fewer calories burned during digestion. It just makes sense. And so what this means is that two people eating the exact same amount of calories are going to have a radically different weight loss outcome depending on food quality, macronutrient composition, and their hormonal response, right? If you're eating salmon and vegetables and you're not having a big blood sugar spike, your body isn't overproducing insulin, maybe you don't have insulin resistance or hyperinsulinemia, what your body's going to do with those calories is going to be so much different than if you're on the blood sugar roller coaster. Your blood sugar is going super high and then super low. Your pancreas is constantly pumping out insulin. And what that insulin does then, it's a nutrient sensing hormone. And it tells your body, okay, we got a lot of insulin. We need to store this as fat, right? So that is a huge piece of this puzzle that I think so many people just overlook. And this leads us then into our third flaw. And as someone who's been a nutrition coach for a decade now, I have so many stories I could tell you about this, but let's talk about real life. How many people accurately track every single bite that goes into your mouth? If you're a mom like me, I've got 3 little ones, I'm constantly, feeding them. They're hungry 24/7. And I think my boys are in a growth spurt because they are just constantly, Mom, I'm hungry, I'm hungry, I'm hungry, right? And it's so easy if we are not, dialed in to like just take a bite of whatever it is we're preparing for them. Have one slice of apple or have one cracker or this or that. And how accurately are we actually tracking every single bite of food that goes into our mouth? Research shows that dietitians underreport caloric intake by about 10 to 20%. And it should be no surprise then that the average person underestimates their caloric intake by about 30 to 50%. That's what the research says. That's not what I say. And I will say, as like a big part of this is, unless you like have your phone on you 24/7 and like you take a bite, you write it down into the app, or if you take a bite and you write it down on a sheet of paper, it's like so time consuming to track your calories super accurately. And it takes so much time. It is, it's kind of like a depressing process, honestly, especially if you're like trying to be calorie restricted, because you just see that number of calories that you ate. Like, oh, I had 1 olive. Oh no, like we're going up. And you see the amount of food that you have left to eat in the day just get lower and lower. And you're like, I'm not going to have any calories left for dinner, right? And I think that also plays a part in underreporting. And I will say, as a nutrition coach who has asked clients in the past to record the food that they eat on paper, in an app, the paper is always, the best one, because there's kind of this like joke and understanding between nutrition coaches when we ask people to track our foods. It's like, we know if you have sat in your car right before your appointment with us filling out your tracker, because it's so obvious, because it's the exact same pen. Your writing kind of looks the same. A paper that has been like filled out as you go has gone a lot of places, if that makes sense. And usually they look quite worn and will have usually some splatters of different food on them because it's made its way around your kitchen and with you, a number of places for the most accurate counting. And so it's really, really difficult. One, I want to say to accurately track your calories. Like I don't want to like put shame on anyone for not accurately tracking because it is a very, very difficult thing to do. Personally, I hate counting calories. I hate tracking my calories. I will do it periodically just to get an idea of like how much protein am I eating, how much fat, how many carbohydrates, and just to kind of get a feel of, what I'm doing with my nutrition. If I feel like if I need to dial something in and I'm having a hard time identifying what the issue is, I will track maybe my calories for a couple of days. But I've gotten to this point in my coaching where I actually no longer ask people to track their calories as a baseline. Maybe once in a while, if we're trying to troubleshoot something, I'll ask for like 3 days of normal eating. But it's an incredibly hard practice. And so if this is something that you have done for years and years and years, one, I want to say, don't let anyone tell you that you don't know how to track your calories right. Because some of these women that I have met who have tracked calories for years, like they know more about calories than anyone out there. Like you guys, you know your stuff. And it's still incredibly hard to track, but you do it. And this leads me into my next point, which if you don't know this, I learned this probably about 5 years ago. It was the first time I read this, and I was kind of in shock because it really puts a wrench in this theory of calorie counting. And that is this, that even if you're perfectly accurate at counting every single morsel of food that goes in your mouth, the number on food labels isn't accurate. So the FDA allows for a 20% margin of error on calorie counts, meaning your 200 calorie snack, whether it's a snack bar or something else, could actually have 240 calories in it or as few as 160 calories. And if I was a betting woman, I would say most probably have more than less, right? So, in other words, calorie counting is based on a system that is inherently flawed from the start. And so, if you've been trapped in the cycle of calorie counting for years and years and years, my guess is that you probably feel defeated on some level. You feel frustrated. And I want to tell you that your feelings are 100% valid. And I have like some level of frustration and anger towards people who are continuously perpetuating this idea that a calorie is a calorie. And if you're not losing weight when you do a calorie restricted diet, well, you're not working hard enough. You're not being honest about your tracking. You're just not working hard enough. You don't have the willpower that you say you do. Like, are you lying to me? I just have a really hard time with that because like I just kind of summarized for you, and this is just looking at like three pieces of the puzzle where your metabolism is adaptive, it's not static. So the amount of calories that your body burns is going to change based on what's coming in and what your hormones are doing. Not all calories are created equal. And then that third flaw that, there's so much human error when it comes to calorie tracking, whether it's human error or like the food company's error. I just want you to like know that your feelings of frustrated are valid. And this is why in lifestyle school, it's not focused on calorie counting whatsoever. What we're focused on is creating a lifestyle that's going to give you the results that you want by addressing your blood sugar dysregulation, by addressing your insulin, nutrient sensors, hormones, your insulin, your leptin. We're going to look at the food quality that you're eating. Maybe you're nutrient depleted. Like if you've been eating really low calorie for a long time, it's likely that your body is starved for some different nutrients, especially if you've been eating a highly processed diet on top of that. And so we're going to look at your sleep. We're going to look at your stress. We're going to look at all of that because, you are so much more than calories. You are a living human who has so many different factors and facets to your life and to who you are, how your hormones are operating. And all of that needs to be taken into account when you're trying to lose weight. And if someone isn't doing that for you, I want to tell you that is a huge disservice to you. So I'm going to get off my soapbox now and we're going to keep moving. So if calorie counting isn't the answer, then what is? So First, I think it's really important to focus on the food quality that you're getting. So, prioritizing healthy protein, like, animal protein. I personally prefer animal protein to plant protein just because the bioavailability of animal protein is so much higher, and you don't have to eat nearly the amount of volume to get adequate protein. And most people have an easier time digesting it. That being said, if you're eating real whole foods, that's always going to be better than processed foods, whether that's protein bars, protein powders, etc. Healthy fats, olives, avocados, nuts and seeds, full fat dairy, fiber, so vegetables that are loaded with fiber, chia seeds, flax seeds, and whole foods, because what these things are going to do is they're going to help regulate your blood sugar, regulate your insulin, and regulate your satiety hormones. And if you aren't looking at that piece of the puzzle when it comes to trying to lose weight, you're going to be really miserable and really hungry and cold, probably, as you try to lose weight. And hopefully you're realizing what I've done in the past just hasn't worked. And it's time for, a different approach. So we got to look at the food quality. Obviously, I'm going to say incorporate fasting. I'm a big believer in fasting for both men and women. And, instead of eating 6 meals a day, start with some time restricted eating. And what that means is, you sit down for your 3 meals a day, your breakfast, lunch, and your dinner. You sit down, you look at that food, you say thank you for that food, and then you eat it slowly. You enjoy it. You eat until you're satisfied, and then you're done eating until your next mealtime. I think so many of us, we have like our default is either eating or not eating. And I think most of our defaults are eating. So it's like, if your default is eating, what that looks like is you have breakfast and then your 6-year-old needs a snack. Well, you have a little bite of their snack, and then you go to Costco and you have a little bit of each of the samples that are available to you. And then you get home and then you have lunch. And then after lunch, your kid asks for another snack. And so you have another bite of that. Or, you get the munchies at 3 o'clock. And so you have, some cookies or like half a donut. And then, you start to feel hungry. It's about dinner time. So you have a slice of cheese and some crackers. And then, an hour later, you're eating dinner. And what you have essentially done all day is eaten all day. Like, our body needs a break from eating to be able to tap into stored fat. Like, if we're eating all the time, our body's always going to use the food that we're eating as energy first versus fat stores. So incorporating fasting, that's going to look different for everyone based on, a number of different factors. And we really dive into that into Lifestyle School and in my personalized coaching program. But even just starting with time restricted eating, trying to eat between 7 and 7 in the day. You don't eat after 7. Ideally, you're not eating, 3 hours before you go to bed. That is going to have a huge impact. Prioritizing your metabolic health, and what that looks like is doing some strength training workouts, whether it's body weight to start, to, getting into heavier weights. Personally, I love heavy weightlifting. I've done it for years and years. Unfortunately, I've had to take a little hiatus from some of that due to some chronic back problems, unfortunately, after having my third baby. But strength training is a huge piece of that puzzle. Making sure you're getting quality sleep. If you follow me on Instagram at all, I'm always talking about sleep. If you're in my community group, we're always talking about sleep. Sleep makes everything in life better, right? If it's like your mood's low, if you're having a lot of cravings, if your stress is really high, sleep is like such good medicine. It's free, right? Sleep is such a big part of this puzzle. And I think it's underrated. Like, we're sleeping, I think 25% less than we did 100 years ago, and it shows. And then, next would be stress management, right? We live stressful lives, and some of it is self-inflicted. There's some things, that you can't handle, and you got to figure out how can you move forward and through the stress, because you have no control over it. But then there are things in our life that maybe we're adding stress where we don't need to. Maybe it's setting boundaries in relationships. Maybe it's not signing our kids up for 10 million activities, or ourselves up for 10 million activities, right? So we can just live at peace and not constantly be stressed and tired and frazzled. So, you know, you want to keep your metabolism functioning optimally, and strength training, sleeping, stress management are huge pieces of that puzzle. And then number four, I would say, as you do these other things, is listen to your hunger cues. I mean, if your body is way out of whack because your insulin is high, you've been eating low calorie, you've been eating a lot of ultra processed foods, your brain chemistry is essentially hijacked by these ultra processed foods to be hungry all the time, you can't really listen to your hunger cues because they're lying to you. But if you've focused on quality food, if you're fasting, you're getting your insulin and your blood sugar under control, if you're prioritizing your metabolic health, you should hopefully start to be able to listen to your hunger cues, and instead of letting an app tell you what to eat and how much to eat, you can lean into and trust your body's hunger signals. You know, our bodies are incredibly intelligent, they're amazing, they're beautiful, and they're really good at telling us what we need. But we have to kind of clear the waters before we're able to do that. For many of us, I know that this was like a big part of my story, and I'll tell you a quick story here. Um, you know, I have been on quite the journey on my own health, and I'm learning right along with you guys. And I went through this phase where I was feeling really frustrated with my weight. My body wasn't responding to different things I was trying the way that it used to or the way I was expecting it to. Also, I will put in a caveat here. My baseline stress was like through the roof. And there was things that I couldn't control. There was more things that I could be doing proactively, but I wasn't currently doing them. But I decided to sign up. I had listened to this podcast. I decided to sign up for this guy's weight loss calorie counter macro app just to try it out and like see. And I remember I was like done with my eating for the day, and it was like, oh, you still need to eat like X amount of carbs. And I was like, oh, I need to eat more carbs? Like, this doesn't make a lot of sense for me because generally speaking, I've never done super well with carbs. I have a history of insulin resistance, which plays a big part of that, and a family history of type 2 diabetes. And so I went and I had like a little bag of like those ultra processed chips. It was like Doritos or something to get my last 100 calories and X amount of carbs. Like, how stupid is that? You know? And I ate those and I was like, you know, like, this is a problem. Like, this doesn't make sense. And so it's so much better if we just listen to our own hunger cues, get our hunger cues into a place where they're actually telling us the truth so that we can lean into that and, you know, preferably eat intuitively. But I know for myself and for many of my clients, that is not where we need to start because our hunger cues are way out of whack. So I want to leave you with this. Calorie counting isn't the enemy per se, but it's also not the full story. And if you want sustainable long-term weight loss, we really need to shift our focus from tracking numbers to really nourishing our metabolism and regulating our hormones that are, you know, super involved in our body weight, with our hunger, and our metabolism. So if this episode resonated with you, honestly, I can't believe this is episode number 9. I have loved doing podcasting because versus just like an email that I send out once a week or, you know, my 1-minute videos on Instagram, I feel like doing a podcast is giving me a way to kind of expound on these ideas to make, you know, to give more context to what I'm trying to say, because nutrition is extremely nuanced, and there's like never going to be a perfectly like one size approach fits everyone. And so I want to say, though, if today's episode resonated with you, I would feel so honored if you'd share it with someone. You know, I'm just getting started. I'm 9 episodes in. Share it with someone who you think might enjoy it. If you would be so inclined, I would love for you to subscribe to my channel. Leave me a 5-star review. Let me know what you love about the show, anything you'd like to learn. I look at all of that. And I just really want us to start having a smarter conversation about weight loss that is going to actually truly help people make progress versus blaming them for not having enough willpower or not being truthful about their calorie counting. So thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you guys next time.